Hi, this is Ben Caspit. Welcome to On Israel. Day after day, thousands are taking to the streets, to bridges and intersections, to the sidewalk across from the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. 6 elections, numerous political rivals, 1 massive social protest, and 2 wars with Gaza failed to do what a tiny virus seemed to be doing now. Criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his bloated government has turned into a wave of fury, crossing political, religious, and ethnic lines. For the first time since he took office in 2009, right-wing voters, even West Bank settlers, are showing up at protests against Netanyahu. Maxed out bank accounts and credit cards, an unprecedented economic crisis, and the failed handling of the epidemic's second wave have turned Netanyahu within weeks from an invincible political magician into a vulnerable duck, although not quite lame yet. The first wave of the coronavirus sent Netanyahu's ratings to new heights. For the first time, the Likud under his leadership was polling at 40-plus Knesset seats. The rival Blue and White Party, on the other hand, was crashing, and Bibi was once again the familiar Gulliver in the land of the Lilliputs. With very low mortality rates and a sense that Israel had weathered the crisis far better than Europe, Netanyahu seemed omnipotent, even in the medical field. It was a fleeting illusion. Instead of building on the success to prepare Israel for the second wave, he rejected repeated advice to appoint a corona czar and put the defense ministry in charge of preparing for the coming winter corona wave and properly monitoring infections. Instead, he told Israelis to drink a beer and go have fun, while he took a siesta. His awakening was harsh. Over the past 2 weeks, COVID-19 infections have surged to far higher levels than Europe's. The promised budget increases for the health system did not materialize, nor did a professional database tracking the change of infections. In the face of a rapidly rising infection curve, government decision-making has become increasingly chaotic, often seeming illogical. Israel is now on the verge of a new lockdown, with unemployment rising once again and the deficit deepening. In what seems to be the move of a desperate man, Netanyahu decided to fling cash at the public, but that has not helped him. People are demanding real solutions and an end to the on-again, off-again restrictions landing on them daily. For the first time in more than a decade, Bibi seems to be losing it. At the same time, the chorus of whispering about events in Iran continues after a series of unexplained suspicious explosions, the most serious at the uranium centrifuge plant in Natanz. Unfortunately for Netanyahu, Israel is publicly ignoring these events, and he cannot take credit for them. Instead, he is dividing his time and energy to intense security deliberations, trying to put out the corona fire and to quash the protests. These are tough days for Benjamin Netanyahu, even as the first technical session of his trial on charges of corruption gets underway in Jerusalem District Court. In the past, whenever Netanyahu hit a rough patch, he used to predict that he would call new elections to reaffirm his public support. This time, elections are a dangerous landmine rather than a safe haven. Although he has no credible rival, Netanyahu understands his predicament. His Likud is losing 2 to 3 seats in each successive poll. Ironically, his weakness is creating strange government stability, with Netanyahu and his rival/partner Benny Gantz clinging to each other to avoid drowning. Our guest today was a decorated Israel Air Force pilot and head of military intelligence. He is the only person in the world who has dealt with 3 nuclear ambitious states. Retired Major General Amos Yadlin was one of 8 fighter pilots who bombed Iraq's nuclear reactor in 1981. He was head of intelligence when Israel destroyed Syria's nuclear reactor in 2007. And as intelligence chief, he was also deeply involved in intense discussions between 2009 and 2012 regarding a possible Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear program. These days, he is the director of the Institute for National Security Studies. He is considered a leading Israeli authority on strategic and defense policy, as well as on handling national crisis. General Yadlin will join us right after this brief commercial break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, On Israel with Ben Caspit, and On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Major General Amos Yadlin, Director of Tel Aviv University's Institute for National Security Studies, the INSS. Shalom and thank you for joining us in On Israel, Al Monitor's podcast from Tel Aviv. Shalom, Amos.
Shalom, Ben, and shalom to all the listeners.
Let's start with your permission with the coronavirus crisis. Thousands of Israelis are roaming the streets almost on a daily basis, trying to storm the PM residence in Jerusalem, protesting on bridges and major intersections throughout the country. It seems that this time the protest is all Israeli, left and right, rich and poor, and not going anywhere. You in the INSS issued a few days ago a detailed plan how to stop the pandemic and actually save the Israeli failing economy. Can you sum it up for us?
Yeah, very early in the crisis, we figure out that this is not a sprint. It's a long marathon. And I described it as a year or 2 year campaign against the corona. And the comparison was to the independence war. And what we also identified early, very early, when everybody was concentrated on the disease, that this is multi-dimension campaign, multi-dimension war, and you have to handle the disease with one eye on the disease, on the health dimension, but not less important, maybe even more, on the economic and social consequences of the disease. It was very easy to put all of us into our home, into lockdown, but we figure out that going out will need a very detailed planning on a differential policy. Not everybody should go out, not every sector of the economy, not all the ages. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister have done the war personally with the Director General of the Health Ministry without any preparation of alternatives, plan, and more than everything, execution mechanism to handle the disease.
Do you think it's a leadership problem? Because I saw a feature by you in Yediot Achronot today talking about leadership process. How can you explain, leadership problem? How can you explain Netanyahu, such a skilled and talented politician, not allowing anyone professional to help him in this and trying to manage, it's a management problem to manage it all by himself?
See, you know better than me, Ben, that Netanyahu is in trouble in his judicial front and some trouble in the political front. And he identified an opportunity to gain some dividends. So on the first stage, he did it alone, and then asked all the people to say, yes, he is a great leader. But this is not the way to handle such a crisis. And he missed an opportunity to prepare by delegating many of the tasks to the defense establishment, which is the only and the best organizations that can execute a very wide and deep campaign into many dimensions. And we lost 2 months after the so-called winning on the first wave. And when the second wave arrived, it was a disaster. He can't do it by himself. He was unwilling to delegate authorities to his political enemies, in the beginning Bennett and now Gantz. And the IDF, which is the best, it has our best sons and daughters. It has wonderful commanders. It has budget. And he knows how to operate huge operations, was kept out of the fight, and the results are accordingly.
I think one of the major mistakes, and correct me if I'm wrong, was done between the waves. After we managed to succeeded to block or stop the first coronavirus wave, then instead of preparing the system, the healthcare system, and other things to do in this interim era, I think just, the Prime Minister told the Israelis, go ahead and have fun, and now it caught us in surprise.
I'm coming from the Air Force. I served in the Air Force 35 years. And the Air Force is the best organization in Israel because it has a debrief every afternoon. And the second lieutenant can tell the squadron commander, what we have done today, what you performed today is a mistake. So Bibi haven't done a debriefing, and some mistakes were done, even in the first wave. But more than debriefing is the issue of planning. You have to have a plan if the second wave will come. And instead of planning, he have done another mistake, sending all the students back to schools, kindergarten, without limiting the number of students everywhere, allowing people to crowdly fill halls and ceremonies. This was a huge mistake. We said it's a long struggle, and you have to fly two curves, the curve of health, and I'm not astonished from the curve of health going up, but you have to keep it with safety margin from the point that the health system will collapse. But in the same time, you have to fly the economic curve. And here, he haven't paid attention. So, Ben Gurion have said before the State of Israel was founded, that we will fight the Nazis as if the British white paper is not there, and we will fight the white paper as if the Nazis are not around. What Bibi has done is the opposite. He fought the health crisis as if the economy is not there. And he tried to recover the economy as if the coronavirus disappeared. So very, very tough mistakes done under his leadership.
Do you fear the collapse of the Israeli economy? We use to say when we are threatening Hezbollah in Lebanon, that Israel, if they will dare attack Israel, we will get them back to the Stone Age. Now, it seems that the economy, if it will go on like this with the close to 1 million unemployed Israelis, it will take the Israeli economy to maybe 10 years to get back to the place it was before.
I think once again, what you see is decisions that are taken every night, maybe twice a night, zigzagging, changing decisions. Because what you need to do in an economy a crisis is basically three elements. One, short range. Give relief and help and assistance to the very poor, those who hardly can pay the rent and even maybe not having enough money to bring breakfast to their kids. This is first. Second, you have to plan how to recover the economy. This cannot be done in a speech at night. You have to make transitions and changing profession of those who are unemployed to a more effective, and the Israeli economy know how to take people and bring them to the locomotive of new growth, which is the high-tech industry, infrastructure, and this must, again, have a plan and not a speech. And last but not least is a wonderful opportunity for reform, because it was Bibi in 2003 that told us about the fat man on the thin man, and this is the public sector that should be a reform. So we don't see him deal with the problems. The Israeli economy is strong. We started the crisis with a very good economy, with a low ratio of debt to GNP. But if you don't have, once again, a strategic plan, and you are taking speeches according to the pressure in the street, this is not the way to run a country.
With your permission, Major General Yadlin, let's go to another issue. I think it's your expertise, and I'm talking about what is happening between Israel and Iran. In the last few weeks, someone is sabotaging this state's nuclear and military infrastructure. Israel, of course, is not claiming a responsibility to anything, but foreign media attribute at least the Natanz major explosion to us. Can you tell us what exactly happened in Iran? Is all the explosions came from the same place, or we're actually talking about one major event in this factory for sophisticated centrifuges in Natanz?
Let's start from the beginning. The maximum pressure of the Americans is very effective, and Iran is under a lot of pressure. Sanctions, the COVID-19 attacked them, oil prices went down, demonstration, the killing of Soleimani, Mossad taking their nuclear archive, their forces are attacking Syria. Even the IAEA, for the first time in Vienna, has an anti-Iranian resolution. So Iran is under a lot of pressure. After saying that, we see that Iran have not stopped its two main strategic efforts to reach as close as possible to the nuclear threshold and to have hegemony in the Arab Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. To your question, the series of explosion and I think is not initiated by one force. There are many who oppose Iranian going forward on the nuclear issue. It's the United States of America, it's the Saudis, it's Israel, and even Iranian opposition. I can refer some of the attacks to a very bad maintenance because of the sanctions, because the Iranians don't have spare parts. But you justly have said that the Natanz explosion is more than maintenance. Somebody have done it. And I think the logic behind it is that time is running out. And the most important factor that influencing all the parties is the elections in November in the US. The Iranians are waiting very patiently to a change of administration. They hope to have a better administration, democratic administration, that will stop the maximum pressure and will go back to negotiation. They don't want to negotiate with Trump, but they hope for Democrats. And on the other side, I think anybody who wants to stop Iran, figuring out that the maximum pressure is lacking a kinetic dimension. And this is the last time to do it. So once again, I have no idea who have done it, but it's somebody who decided that the last 5-6 months of President Trump is the right time to take risk and to escalate in a dimension that was not in the maximum pressure before.
So I guess you agree to the analysis that the November election are a major historic watershed for all the sides. What is the Iranian plan if President Trump will win, and they will face their fate, with a totally broke economy and no horizon?
My assessment is interesting that in any result, the Iranians will come to negotiation. If the Democrats will win, we already discussed it. They will have a more forthcoming partner. But even if Trump wins, Trump is calling for negotiation in the last 2 years. The Iranians are refusing. They cannot have another 4 years like the last 2 years. And this is my assessment, that they will do what they have done in the past. They will say, the regime is going to collapse. This was done in 1988 in the war with Iraq. They swear that they will not do any negotiation, ceasefire agreement with Saddam Hussein, but they did. And they did the same in 2013 when the sanctions were tough on them and they came to negotiate with the Americans. So Trump sends them an open invitation, and if he will be re-elected, I think the Iranians will come to negotiate.
Can you go a little into the details about the Natanz explosion? Ehud Barak said, I think 9 or 8 years ago, that the Iranians are close to what he called the immunity zone. Means that they will not be vulnerable anymore to Israel, because they put most of their nuclear plan underground. Now, this plant that was destroyed was supposed to manufacture very sophisticated and fast centrifuges that could allow or enable Iran to break, if they will decide to change their strategy and break towards the military nuclear ability. Now it will take them a lot more time.
Yeah, I think there is some confusion here. You're absolutely right. Their main working centrifuge facility is under a bunker. Is in Natanz under 9 meters of cement. And over there, they can produce enough fossil material for the first bomb within a month, within a year. What they have prepared in this facility on the surface was advanced centrifuge that could enable them in the future, when they will be installed under in the bunker, to do it much faster, in 2 or 3 months. So we haven't rolled them back, but we took from them the possibility to accelerate and to do the breakout in a very short time.
I think maybe the last question, Major General Yadlin, if I take you back now to your first your last spot on uniform as the head of the military intelligence, and the Prime Minister would ask you now, do you think all what we just described here, all the pressure and the failing economy, etc., is changing or hurting or weakening the stability of the Iranian regime? what would you answer him?
I think it's very, very difficult to predict a collapse of a regime. Nobody foresees or forecasts the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1980s. Our neighbor, Egypt, Mubarak, seems to be very stable and suddenly collapse. And you mentioned Ehud Barak, who predicted that Assad will be removed in weeks. This was 10 years ago. So the regime is more stable than people think. The regime prepared a lot of mechanism, military mechanism, security service, and he still control the network of the masks. People in Iran are smart and sophisticated. They look around, they see what's going on in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, civil wars. So they hate the regime from one hand, but they are not willing to go to the street, and the regime is very aggressive and cruel. Let's hope that under the what we see, there is underground streams that are starting a process to change the regime, but I would be very cautious and very modest in predicting regime change. Before we finish, let me tell you one thing that I think your listeners should know. The Iranians are contemplating on revenge. They want to achieve deterrence against continuation of this campaign. The revenge is in contradiction to their strategic passion for a change in the US. But we have to be ready for a terror attack, as they did in Buenos Aires in the 90s, rocket or missile launching from Lebanon, from Iraq, and any other Iranian innovative way of getting back at us if they will decide that Israel is responsible.
I think we saw a few weeks ago an attempt to attack Israel in a cyber attack, but it was not very successful.
Yes, this is another dimension that we have to be aware that Iran will try. There is the advantage there that attribution is very difficult, but Israel has a very good cyber defense, and we found it and we foiled it. And according to foreign forces, there was even an Israeli cyber attack in one of the ports, the main ports of Iran. So we have to be ready for a cyber as well as kinetic attack or terror attack. And I'm sure that my people in my old organization are very alerted on these possibilities.
Major General Amos Yadlin, it was fascinating. Thank you very much for talking to us on Israel. We will go now to a commercial break and come back with some final thoughts. Stay with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
The headline Major General Yadlin gave us was his final remark we just heard. Israel should beware and prepare from a possible Iranian strike or revenge after the series of mysterious explosions reported in Iran lately. This Iranian retaliation, says Yadlin, can come anytime, anywhere, in an Israeli embassy, for example, or even through one of the Iranian's proxies, including Hezbollah. General Yadlin's assessment is that the Iranian regime will be willing to renew negotiations about a new nuclear deal with any American president after November. Yadlin's rate of the government's performance in Israel about the coronavirus crisis as poor, claims that there were no debriefings, nor preparations or professional handling of the crisis, and recommends appointing a corona czar as soon as possible and putting the military in charge of the crisis. Thank you for listening. I hope it was interesting. We will see you here next Monday on Israel at Al Monitor. In the meantime, this is Ben Caspit from Tel Aviv. Take care.